Hi everyone, and today I'm taking a look at a lens which is of extra special interest to portrait photographers and just about anyone who loves nice bokeh. I'm taking a look at the Laowa 105mm f2 t3.2 smooth transfocus lens from Chinese manufacturer Venus Optics, and it's for full frame or APS-C cameras. At first glance, this might seem like your everyday, regular, short telephoto portrait lens, but Venus Optics have done something quite exciting here, as this lens has an apodization filter within its optics. An apodization filter is basically a glass element with edges that gradually get darker, as you can see here. This makes the outer focus areas in the background and foreground of your images look a lot smoother. Your backgrounds will not become any more out of focus, but they will look prettier. And you'll see this effect at all magnifications and on full frame or APS-C cameras. Here's an example. On the left is a picture taken by a typical Canon portrait lens, and on the right, the same but taken with the Venus lens. It's not a perfect comparison as they are slightly different focal lengths and I had to move the camera a bit, but what we're looking at here is the actual quality of the background blur. The bokeh projected by the Canon lens is okay, maybe a little bit busy, but the Venus offering is considerably smoother, almost perfectly smooth in fact. There are quite a few photographers out there who are crazy about getting lenses with smooth looking bokeh in their backgrounds, especially portrait photographers, so this lens could be of serious interest to them. Something to note though is that, although this is an f2 lens in terms of its depth of field, the apodization element darkens things a little. So in terms of the amount of light hitting your camera's sensor, it's actually a t3.2 lens, or about f3.5. So you'll still get the lovely out of focus backgrounds of an f2 lens, but it's not the brightest lens in terms of light gathered. Then again, that is the same deal with any lens which has an apodization filter. The lens costs about $700, which seems like a fair price for a specialist portrait lens. I'd like to thank Venus Optics for sending a sample for testing, although as usual, this is a totally independent review. Let's take a closer look at it. The lens comes securely packed in a very nicely presented box. When it comes to build quality, I've been fairly impressed with Venus Optics lenses so far, but this piece of kit is a cut above. The lens's build quality is superb. It's a fully manual lens, manual focus and manual aperture control. It's made of metal, it's pretty heavy at about 800 grams, and it's put together so well that it almost feels like a Voigtlander or a Zeiss lens. The focus ring turns extremely smoothly and very precisely, making it a pleasure to focus, although I'd still recommend manually focusing using your camera's live view mode. And a truly unique feature of this lens is that it has two aperture rings, which work independently. I don't know of any other lens with this feature. The upper aperture ring turns smoothly and gives you markings in T-stop numbers down to T8. That's clearly designed for video makers. And the lower aperture ring is more traditional, gently clicking with each f-stop as you close the aperture down to a minimum of f22. The upper aperture ring has 14 iris blades and the lower only 8 blades, but in practice you will never see the difference in your pictures. The lens comes with a plastic lens hood which fixes on quite securely but without clicking into position. I found that odd at first, but it does stay on, fixed quite tightly. Overall, the build quality of this particular lens really is second to none. Let's take a look at image quality now. We'll start with a full frame camera, my trusty old 20 megapixel Canon 6D. Straight from f2, the image in the middle of the frame is razor sharp with good contrast. Over in the corners, sharpness is also very good, and we're not really seeing any chromatic aberration. And if we stop the lens down just to f2.8, the image quality becomes razor sharp from corner to corner. The lens remains fantastically sharp all the way down to f16, although at f22 things get a little soft due to the effects of diffraction. So on a full frame camera, this Venus lens puts in an almost flawless performance. Now let's challenge the lens with a camera with a smaller APS-C sensor. This lens is designed for digital SLR cameras, but with an adapter, it will work perfectly well with a mirrorless camera. So I'm testing it on a Canon EOS M3, an APS-C camera with a very challenging 24 megapixel sensor. Impressively though, the Venus lens remains razor sharp in the middle of the picture frame, even at f2, and the corners look even sharper than they were on full frame, with only the tiniest hint of chromatic aberration. It's quite an astonishing performance really, for any lens at f2. Stop down to f2.8 for a tiny further improvement in sharpness. Now, on a 24 megapixel APS-C camera, the effects of diffraction kick in quite soon, and as you can see, f8 is looking just a touch softer and f11 a touch softer again. Technically though, that's just diffraction, so it's not the lens's fault. Overall, this is actually one of the sharpest lenses I've ever tested, and I'm hugely impressed. As well as taking nice portrait pictures, it could also be great for landscape work, and it's probably sharp enough to even put in a good performance on Canon's 50 megapixel cameras. Okay then, let's look at vignetting and distortion on a full frame camera. The lens seems to be distortion free, and vignetting levels even at f2 are not very serious. Stop down to f2.8 for even brightness into those corners. That's also a good performance. Let's see now about close-up image quality. The lens can focus down to about 90 centimeters, not very close, but on a par with other portrait lenses. Straight from f2, the lens remains razor sharp even at close focal distances. When it comes to bokeh, as I've already demonstrated, the Laowa lens generates exceptionally smooth bokeh in a class of its own, really. At long or short magnifications, the lens presents your backgrounds and your foregrounds extremely smoothly, in a way that normal lenses can't really hope to achieve. How valuable that feature is to you is your decision, but I love it. So far, the Venus lens has given a flawless optical performance, but its one weakness seems to be that it doesn't work well against bright lights, even if the sun or other light source isn't directly in your picture. Here you can see that it flares quite a lot. Thankfully, if you just use the lens hood when shooting outside, then it's not often a problem. Well, overall, I think I've said everything there is to say. This really is one of the sharpest lenses I've ever tested, and its other optical characteristics are almost flawless. The lens's build quality is also excellent, although it is rather heavy, but at the end of the day, the bokeh. For some people, the lens's exceptionally smooth bokeh is something to get particularly excited about, and honestly I did myself, so I would say this is probably one of the best portrait lenses on the market today. It certainly comes highly recommended.